Welcome, everybody, to the Lovecraft Tapes Presents. My name is Jeremy, and tonight I'm hoping to share with you how to make a monster podcast. As you know, or may not know, I am the creator, editor, writer of the Lovecraft Tapes actual play Call of Cthulhu podcast. Hello to everybody in the chat there. Lupine Vida. Hi, Lupine. Profitable World, Beyond Peril. Hopefully, other folks will join us tonight because, as you know, October, Halloween specifically, is the anniversary of our podcast. And we've been doing this for 5 years now. This will be our 5th year. And I thought that it might be fun while we're sort of on a recording break, in order to keep up the live streams, to share some different and interesting and varied content that we like to call cornucopia. And each week we're just sort of adding something a little new, a little different to the roster. And this week I decided that a little bit overdue, that maybe I would share some secrets or my process for actually creating the podcast on a regular basis. All the technical stuff, and just hopefully give some folks a little bit of insight into that. You might find it interesting, and you might not. I'm not sure. But I'm going to go over some technical details and then show you the actual process. So what we do, what we go through, and how I produce it at the other end. So about 5 years ago, a little more than that actually, I started listening to other actual play podcasts and became addicted to them. But oftentimes I thought, maybe I could do better. I don't know. Maybe we could. So I gathered some friends and family, and we ran a couple tests and just tried it out. And it was off to. If you listen to some of our early episodes, you'll see that we got off to a shaky start. There are a lot of moving parts in any podcast, and I'm not saying that the process you're going to be seeing tonight is like the do-all, be-all, make or break your podcast, because everybody has their own process and desired outcome for this sort of thing. I have a relatively high expectation for what I think the podcast should be on any given time. So I have striven over 5 years to make this as high quality a production as I can. I won't lie to you that, even from the get-go, it was apparent that creating and producing a podcast was going to be a very long and drawn-out process. It takes attention to detail. It takes patience. It takes sitting in a chair for long periods of time. And it can be exhausting at times. Sometimes I'm against the wall for timelines and deadlines, but I will say that over the course of 5 years, I've managed to figure out a schedule for recording and editing that makes sense for us and helps keep regular content streaming into our feeds, into your feeds, I should say. So basically what I'd like to do tonight is show you how we record, how we synchronize, and I want to show you how I edit this thing. All right. So the first thing we try to do is each of the participants has a copy of Audacity. That's our main recording software. You'll see here I've got it up on the screen. We've been using Audacity for quite some time. I think we've dabbled with a couple other programs, but this is so basic. It's just nice to turn on, leave it run while we're recording, and then each of those participants will then send me their copy of the recording that they made. And now, again, all of the moving parts, it's very difficult to, number one, make sure that everybody has their microphone and set computer settings proper, even when Windows is constantly trying to change those settings, unless you specifically lock out those settings or lock those settings. We've all gone through it. Each of the participants has had some electrical noise, or Audacity stopped working, or Windows reset the microphone to 50%, something like that. There's always been technical issues, and we've come up with a checklist at the beginning of each recording to sort of go over and double check things. Other things that can interfere are Windows updates. If you have your computer to set those to arrive and install automatically, that can be a big deficit, particularly when you're live streaming or running any other software. It can interrupt all of that and even restart your computer in the middle of a broadcast. That's happened. But barring any of those technical details, you kind of want to use something like Audacity to just simply get the recording up and running quickly. So what we do ordinarily is we say, okay, let's go ahead and start our Audacity. I usually check my microphone setting here to make sure that the recording level is going to be at 100%. That means that my microphone is going to be at 100%. And I've already looked at my Windows settings to make sure those are all locked in 100%. And I've actually gone in to the nitty-gritty details to make sure that Windows is supposedly not going to allow other software to make any sorts of changes to that input. So once those things are all locked in, I just start the recording. We start the recording. And so we kind of joke around a little bit until everybody's ready. Maybe we make some little bloopers or jokes just to kind of warm ourselves up. As you will hear if you're a Patreon supporter at patreon.com/Lovecraft Tapes, you'll see at the end of each of the special edition episodes that we publish there are many bloopers and sort of out of context recording bits. That's where this stuff comes in. Also during the regular recording, but a lot of times, we have about 10 or 15 minutes before we live stream, so this catches a lot of that stuff. And then essentially we all ready up. We say, okay, is everybody ready? Okay, let's go. Everybody can see each other on the live stream, so we put our hands up like this, and I do a countdown. We do 3, 2, 1, and that's our clap. It's sort of like a clap when you're trying to synchronize sound on a movie. And then we record the podcast. So we dive straight in. We're live streaming at the same time, but primarily we are focused on the audio and not the performance. We do rely on live stream video to sort of gauge each other's reactions in some cases, but that is a minor consideration. Technically, we should be focusing solely on the audio quality. So let's say an hour and a half, 2 hours goes by, and usually it's about 2 hours we'll have of recording material. And at that time, once we've finished and sign off, then we'll go ahead and stop the recording. So now we have essentially 2 hours of raw audio that we need to do something with. So each of the participants will then go to File, export as MP3. That's the file format we use. It's just very convenient. We've already got it sort of set up with the presets that we need. We use joint stereo, although essentially it's recording in mono. Mono is all you really need. So, and we've got basically a standard quality there. And then you want to arrive at a file format, file name that is going to be consistent over the course. So we usually do case, I'll say 666, tape 666, whatever it is, and then underscore my name, Jeremy, and I'll save that as an MP3 file. And I'll go ahead and save this actually. I'll save this to original audio. Boom. And you'll see it'll take a couple minutes at least for a 2 hour raw bulk audio, but this took very, very long. And then once you're done with that, you just close this. I don't need to save it because it's done and done. So then each of those guys sends me their audio file. And then on my end, I compile them usually the next day and bring them in to Adobe Audition. And let's see here. We did K66. There we go. So I import this into Adobe Audition. You can use any sort of, you can actually use Audacity if you want to. I am simply have been using Adobe Creative Cloud for so long. I'm hoping to get away from it because it's getting more and more expensive, but I just know the system so well right now that it's going to be a tough row to hoe if I do decide to switch. So I'm going to bring in each of these folks' audio files, and you can see here is the waveform. Mine looks pretty dang clean. If I zoom in, for instance, on some of the dead spaces, you're going to see just a flat line. That means I have no background noise. I have the heat off currently. I'm in a room that is closed off. I have the microphone very close to my mouth so that it's not catching any extraneous room noises during those silences. And I have my volume and gain and all that set to exactly where I need it to. I also use a pop filter with a foam cover over the entire thing to help protect it. So it's like a little soundproof booth over my microphone. It helps immensely to iron out these potential noise sections. So, and I can show you in some of the other folks because we all have different recording environments. So, for instance, Brian is in a little sort of nook. His office is in a little nook, but it's also part of a larger part of of his house. He has probably a taller ceiling than I do, so there's more noise there. He has a dog, so occasionally you hear the dog skittering around, that sort of thing. Some of that stuff is unavoidable. For my part, I just basically let my wife know that I'm going to be recording, and she knows to keep the TV down and not to stomp around and do things during that time frame. It's very generous of her to do that, and she's been very helpful in helping me keep a nice, quiet environment. Okay, so ordinarily then what I do here is I run this through processes, right? So if I have something that, well, number one, you want to make sure there's not too many peaks and valleys. You don't want too many really loud, if somebody is like, oh my God, that's going to peak on the level. And you also don't want those really quiet things, because if you have that variance, it's going to not come across as well, and it makes for very difficult audio editing. You kind of want to get the peaks and the valleys to be closer together. So what I do is I do an effect, amplitude and compression. And here we're going to do a single band compressor. And again, what that does is it will sort of take those peaks and valleys and squeeze them together a little bit. Okay. It's not going to allow too loud, and it's not going to allow too quiet. So if I apply that, you'll see that everything got squished sort of closer together. We've taken it down to, I think it's about 11 or so decibels. So we want to counteract that. Obviously, that's going to be too quiet. If you listen here, I'll go ahead and play this for you. End of each of the special edition episodes that we publish there are many bloopers and sort of out of context. Okay, so that's okay. I mean, it sounds okay, but essentially what we're trying to get to is around minus 2 decibels instead of minus 11 decibels. So what we do from here on is I'm going to take that file and drag it into my my drag and drop workbench here, and I'm going to apply something called match loudness. And I found this particular, I guess you'd say, series of settings all combined into one process. And they call it match loudness, and it's a loudness that basically you only want to get to a certain loudness, but you want everything to be up towards minus 1.5 or minus 2 without crunching everything too low or too high, but to get it to where everybody is sort of at the same peak level. And so if I go ahead and run this, it's going to do a few things. Basically, it does the loudness and then does some statistics. So it's again a series of things. If anybody's really interested and has this software, you could probably emulate this in other software. I'm more than happy to share these settings with you if you have any interest in that. So you can see now that the resulting waveform here, the timeline is about 1.5 is the peak. It never gets higher than that, so we're not blasting anybody. And if you listen to it, end of each of the special edition episodes that we publish there,
much louder.
There are
much
many
clearer.
bloopers and okay, and that's basically, well, there's one other process. So, and maybe I can show you this with somebody else's audio file, because I don't have any noise. But if there was noise, even a little bit of noise, then that would also be amplified. And I can show you that in somebody else's, not to pick on anybody, but everybody except for me and Matt has some sort of noise going on. And I'm not sure why that is exactly. We've tried to emulate the settings so that they match with all the players, but it's got to be because of Matt is in his basement and he has a nice cloth backdrop. And I'm in this self-contained room, whereas I believe Lupine and Brian are both in larger areas that invite noise to come through, and that's just room noise. It doesn't mean the refrigerator's running. It could be the PC or the laptop is sitting too close where it's making too much noise. The fans could be going, and the microphone will pick all that stuff up. So, but the thing that I would do ordinarily after this is I would apply some sort of noise reduction on those pieces of noise. So, I used to use noise reduction process, but they just came out and made a little bit better the denoise function. And so this I can actually go in light, heavy, or just do it on the fly. Now, it's not going to do anything to my audio file because it just isn't. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'm going to open up somebody's. Let's see if I can find somebody who is doing this. Open, and I think we're working on number 10 right now, so I'm going to go ahead and do, I think, Lupine. I think Lupine's has been better recently, and again, you'll see this actually is going to take about a minute to open up because it's a much bigger file. It's not that 3-minute thing I did. This is about a 2-hour file, an hour 45. So we'll go ahead and wait on this. And I would highly recommend that if you don't have Adobe Creative Cloud, I wouldn't bother with the expense. It is quite expensive. And so I would caution you to try to emulate this in some other audio processing software. I am looking to move. I've been trying to, let's see, which thing is it? Reaper is the one that Rena recommended to me, and I guess a lot of other podcasts use that. And so I'm curious to try that. But again, I've been doing this for over 5 years in Creative Cloud, so I'm just so used to all the processes that it's going to be a change of pace. And actually, you can see here, Lupine's is pretty darn good. Yeah. So her audio is actually quite clean now. Let's see here. Maybe it won't be once I screw around with it, but let's find out here. So again, we're going to just do the effects, amplitude, and compressor. We'll do single band compressor. It shouldn't take too long. I've only got a couple things open here. Matt Void, my old friend. Okay, there's the compressor. And then if I go ahead and run the match loudness setting. Oh, I guess I can do that. Let's get this out of there. Remove and put Lupine in there. Boop. And so, of course, again, let's see if that timeline or that the noise is amplified at all. I can see a little bit right in here, but that might be just breathing. Usually it's quite demonstrative if it is picking up stuff. But we've worked, I think we've made great progress in everybody resulting in a much better audio file lately. And if you're wondering what I'm wearing tonight, this is the Beyond Peril Behoob Count Hawaiian shirt. You can get that on Justin's Etsy store. All right, so I'm applying some match loudness there. Jack it up. Behoobs. And feel free, guys. I will try to keep an eye on the chat. I know I'm kind of going pretty quickly here, but I'll try to look at that. If you have any questions, yeah, see, Prophet of Woe was looking at my process and saying, yeah, how in depth it is. And again, I'm just a stickler for this sorts of thing. You know, there are plenty of other actual play podcasts out there that do not take these steps. My goal was to be better than them. At least, you know, orally, right? Orally. And orally, I don't know. Okay, so we can see here, here is Lupine's audio file blown up slightly to where we might need to do a little noise reduction. So let's go ahead and listen to this. There's a stretch here. And you can hear her breathing, but you can also hear like air or something running in the background. It could be a fan from computer. Probably a heat. It sounds like to me like a heat vent. And breathing's fine, because what we're trying to do is eliminate that other background noise, because Lupine's not breathing, or we're not breathing when we're speaking. So we're trying to isolate that hiss where it sounds like a heat vent in the background. Okay? And because even though so she's
Watch
talking
Brian
here,
fumble the throw.
Okay, that is there. That hissing noise is there in the background. So what we want to try to do is just eliminate that. So from here, I would just go to Effects, and this will be Noise Reduction, Denoise, and we can actually play with it a little bit here. So for me, this sounds like light noise reduction. So I'm just going to leave it at that, and then you hit play down here. And it's much less, but if you wanted to squeak it even further, you could really play with the amount of noise reduction down here to completely eliminate it. And there are other sort of focusing on different frequencies. You can play with that to try to find out, is this a low frequency, a high frequency?
Watch Brian fumble the throw.
All right. And typically, unless there's an egregious amount of noise, I just go with the standard focus on all the frequencies. And typically, you can just do a light, and it's fine, because you're not really, I'm not keeping the dead noise anyways. I'm clipping that out, and I'll show you that here in just a couple of minutes. But you do want to eliminate that as much as possible for when they are speaking. And that's what we're trying to do now. The big problem is if we stop this and I attempt to do like a heavy noise reduction, and let's say I'm going to do this to like 100%.
Watch Brian fumble the throw.
It's actually not bad there, but you will, if there is a lot of noise, and here we just have a bit, if there was a lot of noise, then it would begin to make Lupine sound robotic, because it's detracting or removing more frequencies than it should. So you don't want to be too aggressive with removal of noise or denoise. You kind of want to use like a surgeon's scalpel. And because I do this on a regular basis, I already sort of know that it's going to be a light reduction in most cases, unless I can visually see that there's a whole lot of noise there. And in some cases, you may actually need to isolate certain parts of the track. But thankfully, it hasn't really come to that lately. But let's say you're going around, in 2 hours, what if the fan kicks in? What if the heat kicks in, the air conditioning? And we're looking for noise that is persistent and consistent, not like a truck going by, because who cares? I can clip that whole thing out. If for whatever reason there is too much noise that I can't clip out, then maybe that joke is wasted and I clip it out entirely and it's just gone. Maybe I have to rework some of the dialogue to make things make sense if there's some dead dialogue or audio portion of audio track that I can't use. For the most part, that hasn't been a big issue, and that's that. So that is the process that I use for recording each of the people recording, me bringing them in, and then what I would do is simply output the new file. So in the case of Jeremy here, this nice clean file, I would just do file, export, file, and then name it whatever my standard naming phrases, naming convention, and the location where it needs to go. We use MP3 again, and this is where I actually change it to mono. So even though it's potentially being recorded as stereo in some cases, I actually force it to mono because that makes more sense in the context of a podcast. If you do stereo, it sounds slightly better, but it's not that great, at least with these microphones. And the resulting file is much, much, much bigger. So, okay, that is it for Adobe Audition for the most part. I'm going to close all that stuff. Next step is the actual laying down and editing of the track. So we have, if there's a full podcast, we have 4 tracks of people, and we need to edit that stuff out into an intelligible podcast. So this is Adobe Premiere Pro. This is what I use to assemble the cuts and edit the cuts. Again, this is super overkill. I only use this because I edited movies back in the day, and I'm just really super familiar with this. But any sort of, non-linear multi-track editing system, like, again, the one that I'm trying to learn more about, Reaper, is probably going to do the same sorts of things. Okay. Let's see. I think Prophet of Woe had a question here. So do you just kind of mix every track together and then do these tweaks, or the tweaks first and then the mixing? Well, what we did in Audition was clean the files. Okay. We cleaned each of the individual files. Yeah. Okay. You got it. And that's important. So I do that step completely separately. I think back in the day, before I understood what the process should be, or my own process became, I tried to actually clean and edit them in here. There is a way to do that. Essentially, Adobe and Premiere, Audition and Premiere talk to each other, but it does result in some sort of dirty files and snippets of files that I really did not like. So I prefer to do a multi-step process. And this is also like, when we record, we're usually done at about almost 11 o'clock at night. Everybody's tired. They send me their files. We all go to bed. I don't even look at them that night. In the morning, while I'm drinking my coffee, I grab all their files. I put them where they need to go. I actually pop them into Adobe, clean them up, because the process doesn't even really need me to be listening to them, because I can see visually if there's a problem, typically. I might, if there's any suspicious activity at all, maybe there was something I noticed in the live stream that, so-and-so reacted differently, or was, clicking frantically on something, then maybe I'll pay attention and be like, okay, something went wrong here. Either the software conked out on them, or maybe, like I've done, I've actually accidentally hit stop, and then I had to hit record again. So anything can go wrong. But for the most part, I bring those files into Adobe Audition and clean them up. I can visually see them, do those processes almost robotically. And again, it takes, to do 4 big 2-hour files each. It probably takes a good 20 to 30 minutes just to clean that stuff up, make sure that everything's good, pop everything into the proper folders and files and that sort of thing. And then that's it. And so then we're going to do the next step here. And this will usually happen. I won't even look at the cleaned up files until I'm ready to start editing the episode. Okay. So what we have here is a timeline. And I have a standardized timeline for every episode. In this case, we're actually looking at K16 Tape 10, which is the following episode. I'm actually editing 9 right now, but I thought it might be fun to quickly do 10 just to get it started so you understand the process from the get-go. And I've already got tracks set up. So track 1 here is A1 is Jeremy, Brian, Matt, Lupine. And then I've got some locked and muted tracks for now. The music track, the sound effects track, and the bumpers track. The bumpers track is like the little what my wife did the voiceover for, like, welcome to the Lovecraft Tapes podcast, listen if you dare, and all that stuff, and the Patreon stuff at the end. Just little bumpers and information that we use consistently from episode to episode. Yeah, let's see. Yeah, it still takes like 10 hours. Yeah, it's a very profitable. It says I just have all the files mixed and then cut out all the silences, and it still takes me like 10 hours. Yes, that is absolutely correct. So just to give you an idea of what time this takes, for 2 hours of raw audio, to edit that down to a 1-hour podcast takes between 8 and 12 hours for each episode. But that's also going back and adding in sound effects and just making it, as good as possible. So yes, it is a very time-consuming thing to do. Well, yeah. So you'll see here, profitable. I'm not actually doing it 4 times over. The cleaning process I did 4 times over, but here, what we do is we know we've already got the cleaned files, right? So what I do is over here in my media browser, I'm going to go bring in those files. Okay. So I'm going to look down here, and I got to scroll, and I'm looking for K16 Tape 10. And this is the Patreon version. Once I'm done creating the Patreon version, I will then save this file as the public version and hack off the stuff that the Patreon folks get. All that bonus material does not go on to the public one. Okay, so I've got the audio files right here. There they are, all 4 people. I'm going to right-click on that and import it. And then boom, this is my project folder right here. And it brings in each of these cleaned audio files so that I can work on them easily. Now you'll see here in the lower right corner, there's a little progress bar. That is Adobe Premiere needs to conform each of these audio files so that it can work with them. It's sort of like a preloading, pre-rendering kind of thing. And so I typically just wait until that's done. And it only takes a few minutes. Not even that, really, like 30 seconds to do all 4 of them. And then once that's done, then I'm just going to drag these audio files onto their proper tracks. So obviously, I'm the first because I need to be top dog and I should be at the top of the thing, right? That's how this works. So I'll go ahead and drag me onto my timeline, onto my track. And there's my audio there. And okay, I did get an unspecified error. And I think this had something to do with Matt's. I was having a problem with Matt's audio file earlier. I'm not exactly sure what it is, but I guess we'll find out here shortly. Hopefully it won't disrupt everything. There's Brian. And I'm just dragging and dropping these on here. Matt, Boom. Okay, I can see here that there is something wrong with Matt, so that may require some surgery later. We'll find out. It's almost like it doesn't exist, or at least the rendering doesn't exist. It said something about that the match type didn't match up. Okay, then we'll go to lupine. Boom. Okay, then that's everybody. And you can see that if we go to the end of the file here, we're all pretty much in line. So it's probably going to be pretty close. What we want to do now is make sure that we're synchronized. And how did we do the synchronization? It was the clap. Everybody's got the clap. The fun part is I can usually try to zoom in and visually find it. And I'm usually right here. Let's see if this is it. Because you can see these stark noises right here. Probably right here. I don't know where Matt's going to be. We'll have to figure that out. But I assume this is me going 1, 2, 3, clap. But we'll find out. No, I'm wrong.
Yeah, duh.
Let's see here. All right. There's a clap there. So we know that is Brian's clap. I'm going to use the razor tool to get rid of everything that is in front of that. There's my 1, 2, 3 clap. And basically I just go to, come on, baby, the peak of that clap. It doesn't have to be perfect because it's going to be it's conversational. So you want to get at least close to that. And I can see this is my a 3, a 2, a 1. There you go. And we're going to go ahead and slice that puppy. And then the fun part's going to be, let's see, lupine is at the bottom there, but I don't see anything that's like a super clap. Was this a clap?
Starts with an L.
Yep, there you go. Lupine has a very soft clap. You can hear that. Just those. Okay. Now I think, let me see. I'm going to mute everybody but Matt. And let's see if Matt's even saying anything here. Yeah, there may be actually something wrong with Matt's. Let's go ahead a little bit here. Yeah, it says, the error says, details. I am done with this track. That's an event. Yeah, something's up with Matt's for some reason. So I'm going to have to play with his a little bit later and see if we can figure that out. But we can, in the meantime, just sort of mosey on with these guys slightly. Okay, so then what I'm going to do is slice up, basically just cut those sections before the clap, because they're not needed. I'm actually just going to delete them. Okay. And then I'm just going to go ahead and delete Matt for now since he's not doing anything. And what we're going to do is move everybody up to the beginning. Because now we are synchronized. Those 3 audio tracks are synchronized. Okay. And this is where we start our jibber jabber. This is us just making small talk until I go live with the live stream. And we usually do that with the welcome to
Webby Cammy.
So
I like to call it Webby Cammy.
It depends on how quickly we can get to the live stream. Sometimes we're running a little bit late. So there won't be much of a preamble. We'll get straight into the recording. And in some other cases, there might be up to 15 minutes worth of jibber jabber. So I got to kind of figure out where that might be.
Yes.
I'll share it with you. Okay, so this is sort of jibber jabber here. And usually we want to look incorporated actual footage of a rabbit being killed.
Oh.
Okay, so this is part of the thing. It's like, well,
Because Lem, I do know Lem.
Leave Lem alone. Brian.
Okay, so there we go. We know we're into it right now. Just milk. Okay, well, we're looking for I am Jeremy. Yep, welcome.
Mulholland.
This is to the left. There we go. So this is the beginning of the podcast. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm using Control K as my hotkey to slice all the way through the tracks in a straight line. So wherever the playhead is, it actually just slices everything. So then I can take all three of those files, do a Control X to cut them, hit my end key to go to the very end of the, I guess what you call this, the timeline. And then I'm just going to tease that back. And I'm going to paste that. So this is at the very end. I don't know why I'm looking that way. This chunk of audio right here is actually some of the blooper stuff. Okay. So this is the preamble that I'm going to edit later and just pull out funny little bits that we had. Maybe it was an ongoing joke. Maybe it was just something stupid we said that I thought was hilarious. And so I'll put that at the end here. Then if I do this, I can see the whole timeline. And I'm going to grab the actual start of the podcast and move that all the way to the front so that we have that nice gap here. This is the actual podcast. And at the end here is the blooper stuff. Okay. Then I go back to the beginning. Weep. And I start the actual play at 12. So if I look up here, I'm looking to get to 12. Because I know that's the best spot for when the music is dying down. That's when we kick it off each time. So it's consistent each time. At 12 seconds, you'll see, is when I start to talk. Okay? And if we unlock this stuff, and the reason we're locking this and muting these tracks is because we're just focusing on editing the voices at this point. We don't want to worry about music or anything else. We want to get the voice track, the dialogue, to where it needs to be. But the end result would be this.
Lovecraft Tapes.
And then at 12 seconds every time. Welcome to the Lovecraft Tapes podcast. Boom. Okay. And the music dies down and we're off and running. But right now we're focusing on just the dialogue. So let's dig into the nitty gritty here. What we do is I basically just cut out with a little bit of discretion as to timing the dead space. Okay. I'm also looking to get rid of any flubs. I'm looking to get rid of any extraneous stuff, like if somebody says something like, so I want to look at like, or, the stuff, those are extraneous phrases that everybody says in normal day-to-day speaking, and it's unavoidable, but it's not necessary for the podcast. So I tend to clip that stuff out as best as I can. And as well as I'm very prone to, as you'll notice during this stream, I take a lot of time to think and pause between, saying things. So there'll be long pauses as I'm trying to calibrate with my old brain and older tongue, trying to come up with the next little bit of information. Sometimes it doesn't work out so great, but that's what's happening there. All right. So you'll hear me, my usual welcome. And I'm only paying attention currently on my track. Okay. I know that these guys are not saying anything. They know when to keep quiet during the intro. And if they were burping or sneezing or sniffling or clicking their mouse, I'm just going to delete it anyway. So it doesn't really matter to me. So I'm just trying to
Lovecraft Tapes podcast.
Listen to my audio and
This is
snipping
K16.
out the extraneous stuff. And you can see some of the extraneous stuff. For instance, right here. Let me see if I can get this going. Yeah, there we go. This little section right here, you can hear, that's me taking a breath. And I want to get rid of that. And we play, right? Because it's just going to be better if I'm not taking a breath there. Again, want to try to get rid of all that extraneous noise and focus on the good stuff. You'll notice that the pacing that I choose it is somewhat unnatural, but I think there's value to having a podcast that's, clipping along very quickly. I think that people can fill in the gaps, and they don't necessarily need a whole lot of empty space in order to put two and two together. Now, there are certain dramatic pauses that I do maintain, but for the most part, that is within the storytelling, not for things like this where it's just us rattling shit off, So, and then I'm going to go ahead and do this. I am Jeremy, your keeper of arcane lore. I'm going to clip out that little breath there. I try not to do too much of that. It gets difficult later on if I have like really tiny slivers so unless it's egregious, I keep it in. We play Call of Cthulhu, a role-playing game filled with the cosmic horror. I don't know why I said a cosmic horror, so maybe I can clip that out. Game filled with so I can sort of clip. This is, for some reason I inserted a cosmic horror here. I don't know why. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in. There's ordinarily I just go by fractions of a second, right? I guess it's is it tenths of a second or hundredths of a second? But you can actually get quite intimate here. You can really zoom in and find out where that problem area is. And you want to cut on the downslope. So you want to go look for these little valleys. It'll be a lot less noticeable. And you can drag this to sort of get an idea of what that sound is like. Okay, so that's me going filled with cosmic horror, not with cosmic horror. So right in there is where I kind of go nutso for some reason. So I'm going to clip it right there. I'm going to do Control K to do a slice. And then I'm going to get rid of and go straight to cosmic horror. I can see that this is a very low spot right here. So I'm going to just kill that entirely. Okay. So that's going to be clipped out. And I'll show you what that sounds like in a bit. Okay. So I'm going to go back to my normal audio units. Cosmic horror. And again, get rid of that. I don't know why I said with a. So even at the time of recording the live stream, I caught that stupid with cosmic horror, and I redid it. So that's good. Just the one
just one.
Horror.
Sorry.
Yeah. So that could be a blooper there. I could clip that whole thing and make it a blooper. Role-playing game filled. All right. Zoom in there. Get rid of that breath. A role-playing. There we go. Game filled with cosmic horror, existential dread, and milk jugs filled with milk. Just milk. Oh. Definitely not anything else.
Are you sure? Are you positive?
If you don't believe me, have a sip.
No.
Milk, right?
No.
And so even though these guys are giving me a funny call and response to that, that's meant to be a monologue. So I actually just clip all their stuff out. Then
what's that moving?
Yeah. So your and then, okay, so there we go. Just milk. And we'll do your investigators. Your investigators of the unknown are Brian as Ben McKnight. All right. And now we're cutting on him, so we know the monologue is over.
I have milk as well, but it's 30% pus.
I like the mods. Lupine as Rosa Garcia. All right, there you go. Now you can see this is a great example of Lupine making that audio, but it's not quite loud enough, right? So even though we've gone ahead and cleaned it up back in Audition, there's still, because there are certain procedures you should do, right? So if you're yelling, you want to go back. But if you're whispering, you want to go forward so that it captures all of those nuances at the same level. You modulate the peaks and valleys yourself. And in this case, I think Lupine just was at her standard spot and just said the line. Ugh. And it picked it up, but at a much lower level. So then I can actually take that and quickly audio gain that up to probably about a 3. So that at least brings it up slightly and will make more of an impact in the podcast. So I do stuff like that on the fly. Sometimes during this first pass, this is the first pass for the editing process. It's a 3-phase process, and this is phase 1. And then we'll just keep going here. And then we're going to introduce Matt
as Diego Kennedy.
And then we don't have Matt's audio, unfortunately. So this is actually a pretty good spot to stop so I don't get too far ahead of myself without Matt, because I'm going to have to go back and fix his stuff before I can actually use that. But if I get too far ahead of everything, then it's going to be much more difficult. So we're just going to stop right there, and I'm going to show you. Just pretend that over the course of, let's say, 6 hours, I've done this for the whole 2-hour track, okay? And I've gone ahead and sliced up things where I thought they needed to be sliced, but I'm doing it in a very robotic fashion. I just know that I want to get rid of certain things, extraneous or empty tracks, bits of track, I should say. And what I'm left with is this series of alternating cuts. You got this is good. This one's bad. This one's good. This one's bad. So when I go back through the edit, I go backwards. So I start at the end. Let's pretend I'm going to go ahead and just kill this. Boom. So right now I'm at the end of the 2-hour track. Okay. Then I know that I can very quickly go through and select this. And what I do is a ripple delete. Okay. So this isn't a cut. It's not Control X, because that would just leave a gap there. A ripple delete actually deletes whatever you have highlighted and brings everything behind it up. So it meets it. Okay. So I've got that hotkey as Control Z. You can actually just right click also, but hotkeys are way better. And then do a ripple delete. Okay. So you can see that this section just went that way to the left and met up with the next good section. Okay. And I'm just going to keep doing this. I'm ripple deleting each of those dead columns. And this takes the least amount of time. This is phase 2 of the editing process, because again, this is just a very quick, not too fiddly process, but quite necessary. And I do it in this fashion because it's just quick and easy, right? We can get in with the final phase to, arrange the audio slightly, to clean it up slightly, make the tweaks we need to, add certain effects, add more music and sound effects and everything. So we've gone ahead and we've done phase 1. That was the initial slicing. Then we did phase 2, which is the elimination of the dead slices. And now we start up with phase 3. And in this phase, we're actually going to, because there's no more collapsing of the timeline. Everything, all the empty junk has been trimmed. And so we are more or less looking at the timeline in its finished state, just without all the cool stuff and the general cleanup. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is unlock the extra tracks down here, sound effects, bumpers, and music, so that we get the whole experience, and then we know how to proceed from here. Now, I already told you that I had this monologue right up to here.
As Ben McKnight.
Yeah, right up until I introduced Brian as Ben. And so I'm going to essentially kill everybody else's audio track up to that point. That's it. So it just cleans it up. So
Welcome
it's just me.
To the Lovecraft Tapes podcast. This is K16 Mulholland.
I am Jeremy. You can see it clips along without that empty stuff. The pacing is improved quite a bit. And again, then we
Ben McKnight.
I have
here.
milk as well.
And I
but it's
usually can
30%
see the
pus.
empty stuff.
Lupine
so I
as
delete
Rosa Garcia.
on the fly. You can actually delete those empty blocks as the playback is happening. And if
Ben McKnight.
I have milk as well. But
I also try to
it's 30%
pay
pus.
attention to bad cuts. So between these two tracks, for instance, you can kind of see that Brian's track doesn't quite end. There is still some volume to his final word in the height of his audio track there, right? It doesn't go down to 0. And the same thing is happening up here with mine. You can see me sort of starting to draw in a little bit of breath. In some cases, you might hear a weird little click in the overall time. Let's see if it does it.
Lupine.
Now you can kind of hear a little bit of a like
Lupine.
and that's me taking that breath right before I say lupine. So what I can do is just crank this back one click, and that gets rid of that breath. Brian sounded pretty good.
Lupine.
He was using a long S sound there, so he was probably going a little bit further. And I think he started laughing or something, but that's probably the lowest in that dip right there. And if I wanted to get anal about this, which I sort of don't at this point, I might zoom in even further and try to find that lowest point where it's almost 0 right there. But at this section, it doesn't really matter.
30% pus.
Lupine as Rosa Garcia. Matt.
There you go. So lupine is much louder in this case because I boosted the audio. Okay. And that's basically what it is. And I will bring in other sound effects. Basically, I have a section here with music. So we have, I've got a bunch of Creative Commons 0 music tracks that I use. Way too many, actually. Sometimes it takes longer just to browse the directories than it does to edit the dang thing. But for instance, the music tracks that I laid down for the commercial that is recorded much later, I'll use that there. I also have a ton of CC0. Let's see if I got that favorite sound files right there. CC0 sound effects. So I got a bunch of those. A whole bunch of Foley work that I got off of, oh gosh, what's the podcast that I use all the time? It is, I use Pexels for images, and I use freesound.org for sound effects. And what you want to do with that is make sure that you are using the filter CC0 so that it's all Creative Commons 0, free to use for commercial or personal, and also free to modify All that's very important if you want to adhere to copyright rules, which of course we do, always. So that's how you would plug in the extraneous noises. I've got a bunch of stuff like footsteps or crickets or body thumps or axe blades going, all kinds of things like that. So if I were to apply those on the timeline, and then this timeline is complete, and I know that Lupine was asking about what about the extra stuff. Again, that is, if we look at the timeline, is all right here. And I would just play through this and sort of a dark gray.
Charcoal
so
gray.
Yeah,
well.
just select. I have to listen to it in its entirety and pick out funny little things. And then it's the same process. I go through it, chop it. The nice thing is this is usually a much more condensed section of timeline. So it's only about 10 or 15 minutes that I can play around with. So it's very easy to do like a one pass rather than a 3-phase. I don't have to be quite as workmanlike or production facility to kind of extract what's the fun stuff here. And if it's done quick enough, I can usually sort of remember what we did too. So that's also a bonus where I can remember, oh, so-and-so did that joke. And I'll be on the lookout for that. And or in some cases, even during the normal podcast, it might be a joke that somebody said, but somebody else said another joke on top of their joke. So I have to extract one or the other, and I usually obviously choose the better joke to keep, and then the other one would pop over here into the bloopers section. And so that is pretty much it. And so once I've got the complete timeline, edited 3-phase style, then I make sure that all of the bumpers line up, all of the outros and the kickers and stingers that would announce that it's the end of the podcast. And now we're going to talk about recommendos and that sort of thing. All the standard stuff are all lined up perfectly in those gaps. And then we are ready essentially to export. And from here, I would just do file export right there and export the media, and it will export that out to an MP3. Then, like I said previously, I would get rid of the extraneous Patreon exclusive stuff and then export another version just for the public without all the bonus materials. Then it is time to get it ready for distribution. And I take that MP3 file that I've generated from here back into Adobe. In Adobe, I can then add some extraneous material. Let me show you that real quick. Hey, thanks for the tip, Prophet of Woe. Would love to do a VC at some point and have you watch my editing for a minute to solidify some of the tips you've given in this. Yeah, and you're welcome to take a look at this anytime too. It'll be available on YouTube after this live stream, and you're welcome to look at it as much as you like. Play it at twice speed, whatever works for you. And I'm happy to give anybody tips and advice if they need it. Again, like I said, your process may vary. It may not be the same as mine. This is just what works for me. But I appreciate the tip. So here we are in Adobe, and I'm going to go ahead and look for, let's look for let's look for the last one we just published, for instance. So we've got, I need to look at COC, Blue, Mulholland, and let's look for Case 8, Patreon. There it is right there. So once I've exported from Premiere, I import back into the finished product into Adobe Audition, and you'll see a little section down here called metadata. Now, this is information about the podcast that is usually like in the description. If you were to go into iTunes or whatever, you'll see the title, who it is, in this case, artist, the Lovecraft Tapes. What's the album? I just named the albums based on the case. Then, of course, I have generated some album art for each episode. Each tape has its own unique little album art that I use here and also in Podbean, which is our host. Okay. Recording date, I don't worry too much about. That's sort of a falsehood, I think. I do the standard comments, so complete description of the episode, as well as what the fake sponsor is, and or maybe real sponsor in some cases. We do have the occasional real advertisement. And then the recommendos are in there as well. The genres podcast, the track number, I do case and tape. So this case would be 1608. Then the rest of this stuff is like the copyright. I'm not sure why the URL is not popping up there, but ordinarily I put in https tapes.com, and it should save, but I guess sometimes it doesn't. And then I save this MP3 again. That's it. So I'm just bringing this in, not to do any post-production changes to the timeline. It's perfect as is. And you'll notice that this is stereo. So when we exported from Premiere, we made sure it was stereo because even though it's mono, we want it to be coming out of left and right ears once it actually gets out to distribution. And then we're just bringing it in to fill in this metadata. We save it, we close it, we do the same thing for the public version, and then it's ready to roll. And that's it. And we use Podbean as our host. As I bump my microphone, we just did that early on, and they're not the best perhaps, but they work perfectly fine for us, and I've gotten used to their idiosyncratic interface, but it works. So we are distributed through them to iTunes and Google and every place else that you can think of. It's a standard RSS feed that goes out quite successfully to everything. So you can pick up our podcast on, pretty much any podcast player. It's wherever you want, and whatever platform you want or whatever marketplace you use, it doesn't matter. We're going to be there. And so I highly recommend that if you want standard distribution, that you do something like Podbean. I think it costs, it's an annual fee for us. I don't even think they have monthly costs. That would be kind of silly. But we do an annual cost, and I think it's in the neighborhood of, I want to say either 99 or 120, thereabouts. It's right in that ballpark for annual. So they host the actual podcast, and obviously all of the files and the distribution of that, and the bandwidth for when people play it. If they go straight through the Podbean app, for instance. It's just very convenient to have all that stuff there. And then I can, there's a website, but it's relatively rudimentary on that side of things. But I also replicate everything on lovecrafttapes.com in the format that I want to see it in. But when you play it on our website, it's actually the Podbean panel that you're playing. So I don't do much in the way of marketing as far as advertising. So we don't do any like Facebook ads or Google ads or anything like that. I just try to keep up a rigorous schedule for whenever there is a brand new episode out, get that out to all of the proper channels, onto the proper Reddit and Facebook groups. Just try to keep up a consistent and professional, hopefully, presence, and keep the pipeline flowing. And that's been the other thing that I've learned over the course of years is just, keep a nice steady release schedule. And so we do every 2 weeks is an episode. For Patreon supporters, you get a bit more because we're doing, I think, in the neighborhood of 4 secret tapes per year. So you get that little extra stuff. Plus, we also do, just some extra things occasionally through Patreon that bolsters that content. But for the public feed, we do every other week. We have relatively little downtime now because of the way that our recording and editing schedules go. We can kind of keep things flowing all year round with very little downtime. In the past, we kind of didn't know what we were doing. We had no established day sometimes that we were podcasting and live streaming. But over the last couple years, we've really cranked down and tried to maintain a consistent schedule so people knew where to find us whenever they wanted to find us at the same place, same time, but also that their feed would just get, a new episode on a regular basis. So, yeah, we've been relatively successful. Patreon's been healthy. We haven't lost. Anytime that we've lost a couple subscribers, we've gained a couple. So it's been sort of treading water. And it's been really nice to interact with everybody there. Really appreciate all the support, obviously, on Patreon. And then the occasional tips here on Ko-fi. Ko-fi? But yeah, I think that's it, guys. I think that's all I got in me for tonight. I really hope that this was helpful to anyone watching and anyone watching in the future. I hope I had a lot of questions when I started to create a podcast. And so I hope that over the course of time that I've been able to either find my own answers or use other people's answers and formulate a process that I think at least works for me and may work for you. I hope that is the case. I'm checking the chat here. Prophet of Woe said, also, I did want to ask, I realized that even though this is my third time listening through this podcast, I have yet to actually write a review for it. Is there a place that would be best for me to write a huge, long one that would give you all revenue or something? iTunes, obviously, is the big player still for the most part. So, yeah, I would definitely say iTunes, but any place. I mean, if you listen to it on whatever podcast platform you prefer, then that would be fine as well. But iTunes is probably the big player in the market. But just do whatever, man. Whatever you feel like you can do. Yeah, speaking of secret tapes, I am in the throes of our Halloween episode, which will be released on Halloween to our Patreon peeps. So again, that is patreon.com/Lovecraft Tapes. And this is a good one. It's pretty damn funny, I must say. And so I think everybody will have a great time with that one. Also, we do have our final secret tape for the year will be broadcast live streamed in late November. I'm not going to tell you anything about it because there are going to be some surprises for this one. So I hope you guys can tune in, and I hope you'll consider supporting us on Patreon to get the final edited version of that. It's going to be a really special one. I'm very excited. We're going to have a great time. So, okay, guys, I really appreciate you spending some time with me here at the Lovecraft Tapes Presents. Again, we're using this as a venue each week just to keep up the live streams and hopefully give you something a little bit different than what we've done in the past. So, Justin and I will be back tomorrow night at 9 o'clock Eastern for Double Vision. I believe we are scheduled to play From Space, which is on Game Pass, and I believe supports 4 players. So if you are a owner of Game Pass or a subscriber to Game Pass and we know each other, I am Lovecraft Tapes, obviously. Although I think on Game Pass, my handle is slightly different. It might be Lovecraft Pod. Try either of those. And if you want to join our squad, we're more than happy to have some more people blast some aliens with us. So it's going to be a good time. We're trying to focus on Halloween scary type stuff. And From Space is a nice, eerie, sci-fi adventures. So, all right, I'm going to say goodnight, and I hope you guys have a great rest of the week if I don't see you. And yeah, talk to you soon. Bye. Hail Radma.